But this is basically an overview of a 6-year hoop net study that was conducted on the south branch of the Potomac River, about a 4th or 5th order tributary to the Potomac main stem. The south branch of the Potomac River, please excuse me, but I used some English units throughout the slideshow. It's about 140 miles long. About 80 of those miles is colonized by channel catfish, and throughout that zone of colonization, we have a gradient of about 0.13%, which doesn't sound like much, but that kind of puts us into the low to moderate gradient streams. It is like I said, about a 4th, 5th order stream at its mouth, where it joins with the north branch to form the Potomac. Median flow is only about 19.6 cubic meters per second. And at a minimum, in our summer and fall time frames, water gets very, very low, very, very clear, and can drop down to about 1.4 cubic meters per second. So not exactly the channel catfish fishery that you would think about necessarily when you think about channel catfish management. So why did we investigate this population? We're seeing an increase in angler interest for the species, both nationwide and within our state. We have no daily size or possession limits on channel catfish on the south branch of the Potomac River. It is a non-native species, but it was introduced at the turn about the 20th century. So it has naturalized itself in with the native fish fauna of the south branch of the Potomac River and has become a valuable sport fish. And we are really lacking in information regarding population dynamics, densities as you go down through the continuum of habitats and drainage area throughout the south branch of the Potomac. Movement, how do these fish move around? How big of a size of regulation do we need to think about placing on this population if necessary? And angler utility. What are anglers doing with the fish that they catch? And historically, catch rates being looked at with boat electrofishing gear has not worked out really well for us at all. It's kind of hit or miss. Has to do a lot with the fish's behavior, because even though this is a wide and shallow stream, our pools can still be fairly significantly deep, 6, 10, 11 feet deep with fairly low conductivity. So electrofishing is hampered, and low frequency electrofishing, I don't know why I do that with channel catfish, but it's not successful either. Okay, here outlines the 5 sites: Petersburg Gap, Oldfields, Wafflecoma, Millicents, and Blue Ford. Those are all sites where we have decent ramps where we can utilize our workboat to get into these pools. All of these sites are pretty well fished by anglers. So we know that they are exploited units of the population. And you can see that we only have pools from about 6 hectares up to about 9. So fairly small pools. So we decided to use 5 nets per pool, not tandem ones, just single nets, and then spread that out throughout the pool to cover all the zones of the pool as best as we could with the size of pools that we have. The hoop nets were dual chambered, about 11 feet in length, 1-inch mesh. Front hoop diameter is about 2.5 feet. And I actually placed in 6.5 inch, which is about a ½ inch larger than the AFS suggested specs for channel catfish boxes, to try to inhibit the capture and ultimately the death of snapping turtles and red river cooters. Pretty large turtles. We saw that the smaller the turtles were, the better they could subcutaneously respire and therefore, not necessarily kill some of those turtles. At least we did this. So 20-foot nylon leads fore and aft. Upstream, we used a 12-pound river anchor. Downstream, we used a 10-pound mushroom anchor. And we baited and rebaited as necessary with about approximately 2 pounds of compressed cheese and soybean log. Okay, sampling periodicity. Because we only had probably maybe 2 people on average to do this work, we decided to really look at each pool on an annual basis. So we'd take one fishing season and sample intensively one particular pool. And we had sampled those pools from June, July, August, and September. Within each month, we'd take 1 week. We would set on a Saturday, run on a Monday, Wednesday, and Friday we'd pool as well. And that gave us an opportunity to get a lot of catch per unit effort data, and it also gave us opportunities to do multiple census population estimates that we could kind of like look at together. So in the field, total length was pretty important because with them actually going in and consuming cheese bait, it kind of throws a wrench in your relative weights, and we took weights, but, we just look at them cautiously. We developed size structure histograms, length frequency histograms. We used Kolmogorov and Smirnov tests, kind of like pairwise, to determine which size structures, which pools were different among them. T-bar anchor tags were applied to the catfish for angular return information. It also allowed the ID of recaps for the Schnabel method over the short term, basically closed population, multiple census estimates. And we fin clipped the fish as well. So that way, when we did our Jolly Sieber season-long estimate to relate back to those months to where we sampled, if an angler took a tag away, we'd still be able to identify that fish was caught in June, July, or August. And of course, in September, you're concluding, so it doesn't matter. So collection of lapillar otoliths in September, field determination of sex as in Norton et al. 1976 was pretty easy to accomplish. And then the fish that we took back for lapillar extraction, it didn't really matter because we could sex them internally and then kind of like get an idea of whether or not our field examinations worked as well, but that's probably a different paper. So analyses, I used R pretty much exclusively throughout this project. I used catch curve mortality estimation, the log linear regression of catch versus age, and then the assignment of unknown ages with an age key and semi-random assignment. And growth rates, I just used our typical von Bertalanffy curve through a nonlinear least squares in R. Okay. So the thing, getting to the results here, as you can see, we're able to string together, whether some Schnabel or Jolly Sieber, we were able to string together some multiple census estimates of the population. Not surprisingly to us, fairly scant population near the extent of colonization upstream at Petersburg, and then really high numbers of channel catfish as you work your way down. Same thing happens with catch per unit effort. Recapture percentage increase as well, which is pretty interesting. But another interesting thing is proportional size distribution of quality and preferred fish declined as you go down through from upstream to downstream. And this will kind of be evident in the length frequency histograms. So up here in Petersburg, it's basically a stock that consists of like large, and it turns out fairly mobile fish. We had a fish that moved 97 kilometers, I think upstream from one of our downstream reaches, and had never been touched before until we got there and viewed the T-bar tag. And it was caught up at this area. A lot of our angler captures came from this area, and they weren't frequently from fish that we tagged there. So that's kind of interesting. Another thing is, as you go down through the size structures, you can see the importance of these, juvenile or smaller fish as they become more of a part of the size distribution. Okay. As far as our angler return information, we had about a 36% harvest rate. So basically, just to kind of review that, if you caught a fish, or if a fish was caught, and that tag was returned, about 36% of those returned tags were harvested fish, which is fairly high for West Virginia, where there's a lot of catch and release angling, anglers that aren't so much revolving around harvest, maybe like some of our southeastern states. So this is interesting. It kind of maybe becomes one of those populations you can kind of do something with management. But out of the 133 tagged returns that we got, only 6% of them, it only came to about 6% of the total number of tags that we employed. So we tagged 2,217 channel catfish throughout the course of this project, only 6% of which returned. And I just left this raw. I didn't tell you that, oh, there's probably going to be, this quantity of tag loss, or, this fish has a likelihood of this, of getting caught twice per year. You all can find that stuff on your own. At least you have the raw data. Movements of angler and staff captured fish were as far as 188 kilometers downstream and up to 97 kilometers upstream. And this probably would have been larger, but that extent of upstream colonization probably tamped down a little bit on that movement. But generally, you can see the fish that were tagged upstream had a higher likelihood of being recaptured downstream, and those that were tagged downstream, actually came upstream or were caught in a neutral position where they were tagged. This is basically the formulation of seasonal movements that we see pretty frequently on the South Branch, just with like electrofishing. We see fish come up they're caught downstream, but they come up and then they utilize the South Branch during the summer and then the fall. In the fall, we have extremely low flows. So they're really kind of like relegated to those pools. It's basically the only deep water habitat that can be found. And then come around October, November, basically when people stop fishing, and therefore we don't have any data from winter, they go downstream and utilize portions of the South Branch that are lower, or even the Potomac River main stem. In fact, 10 fish moved completely into the Potomac River, which is out of our jurisdiction with respect to management. This is probably my favorite figure of the study. This is supposed to be percent recaptures. So just multiply by 100. I made a mistake there. But this is our population estimates, our multiple census estimates, and these are our catch per unit effort. Both are log transformed, because what I would see was with our estimates and our CPUE, I was getting a logarithmic curve. So I log transformed both of them, and it kind of developed a nice predictor. When you add percent recaptures as a function of the catch per unit effort, it improves the power of the equation. So I don't know exactly what's going on, but it seems like those CPUEs that have a lot of recaps in them, I don't know if you're just serially taking into account for those same catches and over and inflating the catch per unit effort. But in those types of situations, it seems like our multiple census estimators maybe do a better job of estimating abundance potentially. That might be due to just passive gear. You folks know how it is when you're setting passive gear and expecting to try to get some sort of adequate catch per unit effort estimate out of it. Could be to variable catch, fish activity, trap shyness, or gregariousness. We also saw sexually dimorphic growth in this population. When we did a forward selection process with ANOVA to determine which von Bertel land feed models and parameters were best suited to explain the population, we found that there was a significant difference in the Brady's K coefficient of the von Bertel land feed curve between males and females. And we also saw that you can see out here on the edge of the figure, there's a lot of gray dots indicating females, and back here on the left-hand side of the x-axis, you can see a lot more black dots. And even with those fish that we assigned ages to, it looked like there were differences between male and female mortality curves as well. So in conclusion, there's a dense population of channel catfish during the summer months in the South Branch of the Potomac River, particularly as you get like midways and farther downstream of the colonization extent, where we frequently had greater than 100 fish per hectare. Size distribution was adequate at all of our locations. Quality size catch per unit effort actually increased downstream, even though our size structure became more diverse and kind of declined as far as like our mean or median length was concerned. And our PSDs range from about 34 to 88 within that range, and that is directly upstream to downstream, most sites. Fluvial tendencies of our fish, just with the transcendence of political boundaries and fish moving extensively downstream. About 18% of our angler recaptures moved greater than 10 kilometers from the tagging location, which I thought was pretty interesting. And this really gives us no confidence really whatsoever in trying to manage these populations over narrow ranges of the river. So if there was ever going to be any type of management for this population, it needs to be river-wide and possibly even transcend these political boundaries with neighboring states. So we found sexually dimorphic growth. We were seeing as great as or even more than 40 millimeter differences between ages, between male and female, or within the same cohort. It's improved our models pretty significantly. You know, there's a lot of scatter around ages and constructing growth curves for channel catfish because they can vary pretty significantly with age. So that's nice. Also, there's some implications for special regulations for like a slot limit. If our females are hitting that slot limit, or if our males are hitting that slot limit, reverse slot limit catch and release area faster than the females may lay below that area for 3 years more than the males. So you could be doing damage to the fecund females in a population if you choose to do that without knowing the implications of it. Size structure and juvenile recruitment differ longitudinally in the South Branch, and low reported angler return, but a high harvest rate. So, considering all of these factors, particularly the what it's saying about angler exploitation, I don't think that this is a population that could benefit significantly from additional regulations at this time. But our oldest channel catfish that we picked up was about 19 years old. And so like many other of these sport fish, catfish species, they can grow to older ages, and they have fairly low mortality rates down to like 12 to 19. So ultimately, it's still nice to kind of keep an eye on this population for impacts to size structure if exploitation would grow, because you're just looking at such a small amount of compensatory mortality that you can work with. Thank you, Katie, for collecting all of the information from our tag returns and getting them to me. Now, with that, I'll take any questions.
We have a minute for questions.
Dave?
You mentioned there's a size difference between upstream and downstream. Did any of that have to do with more sexually mature fish upstream with potentially better spawning habitat? Do you have any thoughts of why?
I'm sure it's habitat related. Like I feel like the upper segments of the river were they were a little bit higher gradient, had fewer like really large chunks of like rubble substrate, wood. You can't keep wood up there because the stream has become really flashy and pulses that stuff out. So I'm sure that habitat selection around the spawn is important. But also I think it's just an opportunity for these fish to get upstream and actually avoid competition with other conspecifics or other fish species up there, and just take advantage of forage that's available.
All right, Brandon.
Thank you.